Welcome to our Play Well podcast series. My name is Marguerite Hunter-Blair and I am Chief Executive of Play Scotland, the national organisation for play. Today, we will look at play in cultural heritage settings. To explore this, we will be hearing from Russell Clegg. Russell is a project worker at the Living Memory Association. He previously worked as a primary school teacher and has a wealth of experience in engagement in heritage sites. Here is our Learning and Development Officer, Jenny Lester, catching up with Russell.
Hi, Russell, and thanks so much for joining us on the podcast.
Hi, Jenny, and thanks for inviting me. Real pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. So could you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what play means to you?
Sure. Well, my name's Russell Clegg, and I am a project worker at the Living Memory Association. We currently have 3 units at the Ocean Terminal Shopping Centre in Leith, and I'm primarily based in the former Debenhams store down there, which we've turned into a community and creative hub. And play is very much part of what we do there. I would say, to me, play is about 3 things. It's about exploration, to make sense of the environment you're in, and to test the relationships that you have with people around you through play. It's about imagination, so it's about bringing real experiences and also the pretend world together in playful outputs. And it's about creativity, the ability to design, to practice, to problem solve with whatever materials you have there, whether it's Lego bricks or whether it's snow.
Fantastic. I love that answer. And I love this idea of using what you have, because as a cultural heritage site, you have a lot of things to use, right? You have a lot of different artifacts. So
we do indeed.
And I think that leads me on to my next question quite nicely, because I think previously we've spoken about play and interaction in creating a successful cultural heritage space. So how important do you think play is in ensuring people are discovering the things that you want them to discover and finding it interesting and exciting?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a challenging question as well, because a lot of people might think that play and formal cultural heritage settings maybe don't work together hand in hand as easy as they might do, but they can do. It is important to address your question directly. I think if you want folk to engage with whatever it is you're engaging with, and I'm talking about an entire demographic here. I'm talking about whatever audience you're working with, whether it's young people, kids, whether it's older people, whether it's sector professionals or your peer group. You need to create playful encounters in order for that engagement to happen successfully. So I think I said to you, I'm working in what is formerly a department store, and we've had kind of carte blanche to develop that space for different uses and different kind of encounters. So at the Wee Hub, which is what it's called, we have a couple of zones. One is a designated play area, which I would say is a free play area. So you have kind of toys in there, you have building materials, you have creative materials like crayons and things like this. But we also have this heritage area, which is using social history artifacts to kind of engage with all people, but it's aimed at younger visitors. And this was quite a tricky thing to do because we had to kind of work out how we could manage the area, how we could manage the fixtures and fittings that we inherited. But what it does is, it's like a trail, and it allows the visitor to interact with objects which can be handled, can be manipulated, they can be held, they can be touched. And it's almost as if we are saying to the visitor, you've got permission to do this. It's not hidden away. It's not in a glass case. You can't just look at it and hope, that one day you might be able to hold something like that. Here it is, have a go. And I think when people feel that they have the permission to handle the objects, then they do treat them with respect. We've seen in our venues that children love the tactile investigation of objects. So we have things like dial and press button telephones, typewriters, musical instruments. And being able to touch and use these objects, to me, you get two outcomes. You get this direct engagement, which invokes a playful response, fun.
It's fun, yeah.
But you also have, in this kind of heritage, under this heritage banner, if you like, guided discovery of the exploration of an object, which can be scaffolded by an adult. They can explain what this is, when they're handling it and touching it.
That's amazing. And I think that's so important, because anytime anyone goes to a museum, why can't I touch it? I want to know what it feels like, and I think it teaches you so much more about it than even if every person who came into your setting was really, really ready to read thousands of words on placards. They're still going to learn more just from interacting with that object, because, how heavy is the phone handle? How hard is it to turn that thing? And then you can imagine being someone using that object, and that playful interaction with it, I just think is so important.
It's a sensory thing, and it's a kinesthetic thing. It allows you to manipulate, to touch, to feel, to gauge what the object is. It's really important.
Definitely. So you said already a little bit about people do respect the items, but I think there's probably a little, if you're someone manages a heritage setting listening, you might have a little bit of an aversion to the risk, to the objects, but also risk to the children in terms of play. So could you tell me a little bit about your approach to risk? Because I know it's a tricky thing.
It's a really tricky thing, and I have worked in cultural heritage settings, more formal ones, where the risk around objects is you don't get your colleague going into panic mode, but they get a little bit anxious and apprehensive when people want to handle something, pick something up, particularly if they've put a value on that object. So I guess the answer is, if you're going to allow, especially children, young people, to investigate objects, there is a risk. There's a risk to that object. It could be broken, it could be dropped, and there's a risk to the safety of the person handling the object. What we've done to try and counterbalance that is we have put low-level signage around, encouraging people to play or handle the objects. But by giving advice around the object, around the situation, offering a choice to the handler, do you want to pick that up? Yes, I do. Or we better not pick that up, it's heavy. Then, as I say, you're giving this permission and you're allowing the kind of judgment to take place. Things do get broken, and they have done. It happens. And you learn from that, both the sector professional and also the attendee, participant, whatever you want to call it. We do learn from that. And I think allowing these things to happen is a learning process. It's a life skill. Oh, we shouldn't have picked that up. Oh dear, this kind of thing. But it's interesting because I mentioned earlier the free play area and the heritage area. And what's really interesting is in the free play area, we have toy, child-size plastic proxies of the things that are in the heritage area.
Okay, so like replica.
So for instance, the children in the free play area are very drawn to the kitchen and the child-size kitchen equipment, plates and pans, all plasticky things. There's a vacuum cleaner.
Oh, yes.
There's an ironing board. And serendipitously, and I really didn't plan it like this, there are social history artifact versions of these things in the heritage area. So it gives the young person an encounter with this thing that Granny would have used. Oh, it's really heavy. Can you push it? Oh, no, I can't push it. This kind of thing. So, there is risk, and I think you have to accept it. Because if you want that playful encounter to happen, which I talked about earlier, then I think you have to make a judgment on the risk.
Definitely. And I think at Play Scotland, we talk a lot about risk benefit. And that really sounds like something you're doing, because you're thinking about all the benefits that can come, even though there is a risk there. And you're talking a little bit about how if the risk is actually too great and the benefit doesn't outweigh it, then you can use replicas, and there are other ways to sort of engage in play and make sure things are still tactile, even with objects that are very important and have a lot of significance and might be, there aren't many of them left, sort of thing. So I think my next question is a little bit around, we've already talked about some barriers to play for cultural heritage settings, including risk, but are there other barriers that you think settings face when trying to include play in their spaces?
Yeah, I think I've kind of narrowed it down to kind of three areas of barriers to kind of play in a heritage setting. And the first one is the physical. So it could be the space or venue that you have.
Yeah.
Was it actually designed to have playful encounters in it?
Yeah.
Did they think about that when they were building the space, making the space?
Yeah.
As I said, we're in a former department store, so we had a bit of a blank canvas, although we've had to incorporate many of the fixtures and fittings that were already there, as I've already mentioned. But we also got the opportunity...
You have to tell them about the pirate ship, Russell.
Yes, okay, yeah, all right. Well, first of all, we inherited quite a lot of mannequins, shop mannequins, which were a huge kind of bonus because people decorated them and some people took them away and brought them back, and lots of different groups got involved with the mannequins kind of thing over the summer especially. And as you've already mentioned, we're developing on one of the old till bunkers, a pirate ship.
I love it.
So we've got a mural on the background, a kind of a tropical island seascape mural. And then the till bunkers themselves, we're going to model into, as best we can, a pirate ship. So we've got these two big poles attached to the ceiling, which we put sails on, and a crow's nest. We're going to draw portholes on the bunkers that kind of face out. And then in between the mural and the till area, there are all these kind of empty cupboards and apertures, which we can put kind of maritime or sea-related or pirate-related objects in, and the children can then explore that space. We're making that now. We want the space to evolve over the time that we can inhabit the space, and we want to create new things for the children to do in there. There is a financial barrier when trying to accommodate play into a heritage space, because you might not have an endless budget to replace things, to buy things, to get new things in. So cost always is. In the heritage sector, cost is always a factor. But finally, and I think this is the most important one of the barriers is the expertise and knowledge of the people in that setting, working in that setting. Okay. Are they themselves, in inverted commas, play friendly?
Okay, yes, yeah.
So I'm quite lucky. I came from a mixed background, from education, from other heritage settings. So I'm not an expert, but I've been able to use that experience, that work experience, to kind of create these opportunities in the setting that I'm currently working in.
So you have these experts in these settings who know all there is to know about the artefacts that are there. But part of the issue might be that they haven't been supported to develop their practice to include play. I also think sometimes there might be a bit of a desire to tell someone everything there is to know about an object, and the easiest way to do that is words. But maybe if we focused on a few things that someone should take away, then we could put that into more playful experience.
Yeah, and I think I talked about the what play means to me, and probably if you wanted to tack on a fourth thing, it would be about curiosity, building curiosity. Yeah. And I don't think you can really inspire curiosity through screeds and screeds of written interpretation. But as I kind of alluded to, in kind of formal museum, if you like, contexts, there is a hierarchy of people. You know, there are curators and conservators who get a bit angsty around objects. And then you've got the engagement people. And sometimes one wonders, what is the dialogue between this community? It's a hierarchy, I think.
Right, okay, yeah.
And I think you have to break down those hierarchies. You have to get the curators in with the engagement people, because they should really need to know what their audience think of what they're doing and how they're displaying things or interpreting things.
Definitely, because I think, the aim for these settings is to have people interested and engaged in what they are showing. And, if you think something is very, very important and you want to share it with other people, then that sometimes means reevaluating how is best, because not everyone's going to want to engage with it in the same way that you do. But speaking of that, you've mentioned those three barriers. Do you have top tips for overcoming those barriers?
Okay, top tips. Okay, well, I've kind of said I'm not an expert. You know, my knowledge has come from different contexts, from working in different places, but that's allowed me to kind of look at a situation and think, we're going to do it this way because I learned, you know, this in this previous context. What you have to do is you have to try to be ambitious despite any constraints you face. Now, they might be physical constraints, financial constraints, which I've already talked about, but they might be attitudinal constraints from your colleagues or from, you know, the top-down kind of approach that some places have. I think you need to understand what your limitations are and work with them. But I would say my top tip is get involved.
Yes.
Right? Be amongst your visitors, learn from them, interact with them, find out what they like, what works, and then you can build on that and keep providing and keep improving.
I love that. Yeah. And I think that's so important because part of the way, I think, to convince people the power of play is to just get people to watch some children play. Because I think there is this misconception, and I say this in almost every podcast, oh, it's just play, they're just playing. And it's like, no, like, stand and watch. Just watch how invested they are, how concentrated they are, how much they're thinking, well, what does this do, what does this do? How many questions are going on in their head and how they're finding the answers themselves. And I think yes, I think that's such a good tip.
And having that flexibility as well. So I've got an anecdote which is fresh from this week.
Oh, fantastic.
So on Monday, we were doing a little hand printing workshop because we want to create a handprint Christmas tree with all the users of our space. So adults, children, all doing a green hand, and then we'll create a Christmas tree. But we also had some free print activity going on, so the children could play in the paint, get the paint all over their hands. Messy. So this little boy, he did he was a preschooler, so probably aged 3.5, and he was in with his mom, and he'd done the printing thing, and I had my apron on, and I was all kind of like, I'm printing, I'm doing the printing. And he walked over to me, had a helicopter in one hand, and then he took me by the hand, and he took me into the free play area.
Yeah.
And he took me to the little kitchen, and he cooked something for me, and he tried to put the helicopter in the oven, and his mum was saying, now leave the man alone, the man's got to go back to work. Kept coming back to me, taking me by the hand, bringing me back in. He wanted to engage me in his play.
Yes.
And that is such a powerful thing for an adult to learn.
Definitely. I think that's really amazing. And, you know, we go to cultural heritage sessions to learn, to engage, to connect. And I think sometimes that is us learning from the children. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful message, Russell. So thanks so much for joining us on the podcast.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Jenny. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us on this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your preferred app and join the conversation by using the hashtag PlayWellPodcast. Find out more about Play Scotland, follow us on Twitter at Play Scotland, and visit our website, playscotland.org.